Let's talk about Kaikeyi. Hello fellow book nerds, this is Gabby and today we're talking about Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. So Kaikeyi is a new release, came out very recently, I think last week, and it's a historical fantasy retelling of an Indian epic, the Ramayana. In the original, Kaikeyi is the stepmother of the main hero character who exiles the main hero character from the palace for 14 years, and she is seen in the story and the history as a naive and then very spiteful woman who exiled the stepson, and she's seen as a villain. So this story is a retelling and kind of from the perspective of Kaikeyi, going from her early childhood when she was a princess in a country, had 7 brothers, and her mother was exiled when she was very little, so she kind of grew up in the palace and helped raise her brothers. And it tells a story from when she was a kid to when she married a king from another kingdom and then eventually had a son, and then how she came to exile Rama. So this is like a spin, kind of retelling of this story. It kind of reminds me of how in Once Upon a Time, the TV show, we get like a reframing of why the evil queen is evil and kind of backstory of that. So that's a very, very similar kind of approach to the story. So as per usual, no spoilers ahead. We will go through each kind of section and I'm going to talk to you about what I thought and at the end share some overall thoughts. So, feel free to go at the bottom here and skip around if you want to. But let's kick it off. So firstly, writing. I thought it was really beautifully written, and this book I have heard compared to Circe by Madeline Miller, and I actually think that's a very, very well thought out comparison because it's similar story of this epic woman who's born into man's world. It spans many, many, many years. It has this feeling of agelessness and divinity, and kind of you can really feel the touch of gods and the workings of gods and how that impacts the story. So I really thought it was beautifully written, really enjoyed it, and it very successfully managed to tell a story across many years, and you also really see the progression of the character, which I think is hard to do. But I think this story did a very good job of kind of showing us how slowly Kaikeyi becomes a grown woman, and then how that changes through the years. Her perspective changes without being overtly outright with it, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, she was 5 years older, therefore she thought differently, but it's very subliminal and very subtle, but when you're looking for it, it's really there, and I really enjoy that aspect of it. So then we have plot. So I really like, so that in the beginning the author mentioned a little bit what the intention behind the story was, and kind of I wasn't familiar with the story at all. So the author does mention that throughout the history, people have wondered what brought Kaikeyi to make this decision to exile her son, and how she, the author, was compelled to examine this and kind of figure out why and how she was drawn to the story. I think that really set the scene very nicely for someone like me who doesn't know too much about the myth, but it didn't over-explain the myth either, so I was still surprised and didn't know where the story was going. But it gave such a beautiful kind of segue into figuring out what the purpose of the story was. And I think that also gave the story of foreboding and dread as you're reading, because the character does kind of reflect a couple of times and break the fourth wall, in the sense that she's like, I think that was the moment I sealed my fate, and I didn't know it at the time, but this was the beginning of the end, that the kind of ominous crap that really works for me in this story. There was such a big chunk of this book where it was just happiness, and the characters were just happy with each other, and everything was so beautiful, and it just worked, and you're like, I don't like it. You're too happy. Something bad is gonna happen. Take away this happiness, and I've already grown to love this family so much, so I'm not gonna be happy when you take it away. And I think altogether it felt very seamless, and the story, the explanation of Kaikeyi and her story and how it progressed felt very seamless and very natural, and it didn't feel contrived, which I think can sometimes a little bit be like that when you have the super sweet, really nice character in the beginning, and then somehow they have to end up as a villain. And for example, I'm thinking of Heartless, where I do think it wasn't done terribly bad, like I still enjoy it, but it did still feel a little bit like the contrast between the characters was so great. But this utilized a lot of what I really like in stories like this, when it's the character didn't really become evil, or I do well, to be fair, I like it when they become evil, but in this instance it was like they became evil, but it was all of these circumstances that kind of led them to this path, and you really truly see that this is the only way forward. And it feels so daunting because all of these relationships were built and now they're being torn apart, and it hurts. Your heart will be bleeding and you'll be in pain because it hurts. But you also see why it had to be done. So I think all of that contributed to a very cohesive, very good plot and story. And I really liked how, from what I read from Wikipedia, they did stick to the main aspects of the myth, because I do really like it when it's a retelling. You can really recognize the beats of the story, and that doesn't change. But what changes is the intrinsic motivation, the backstory, the things behind the walls that people could not have known, that wrote the myth to have known. Like, all of these things kind of pad out the story, and you get to the same ending, but the perspective is completely different. So I think that was done very well, and it worked really, really beautifully in this book, and I really enjoyed it. So now let's talk about characters. So we have Kaikeyi, who's the queen, and I loved her. I think she was such a strong character, and you really understand her. You understand where she came from, how her childhood informed who she was as a person, but also how new people she met really impacted her, and how those relationships worked out. And she has this power to kind of enter this binding plane, it's called, and in this binding plane she can see her relationship to other people as these like strands going from her chest to other people's chest. So, you know, like, it's this kind of idea of it's not really similar. I was gonna say it's the idea of, you know, the strings of fate, but it's not really. It's not fate, it's actual relationship. She can see how strong they are. For example, her and her twin brothers, you know, a bond is like this very strong golden chain going from her to her brother. And it kind of like, as she progresses and the relationship grows and she, you know, says the right things and encourages them, the bonds grow stronger, and she can see that, and she can also influence people through these bonds. And I really like how her having this power really informed who she was as a person, because it's inherently quite manipulative. If you can you can physically, you know, send ideas into people's minds and kind of make them see you in a different way. Like, it's inherently manipulative. But if you have that from birth, or from when you were very, very young, and you use that to navigate the world and get to know the world, it doesn't even feel manipulative, because that's just how you relate to other people. So I thought the way this plot point and this kind of power fitted into the world was beautiful. And yeah, I just really felt like I felt the impact of it, and you come to rely on her always knowing what the relationships are, but then you also, you know, see her grow scared of it if she takes it too far. And I think that was a very good plot device to have been used, and really informed the character as well, which doesn't always happen. And then my favorite part is the fact that when she leaves her father's kingdom and marries this king, she is the third wife. And I was 100% expecting, you know, this to be, the other wives will be catty, they won't get along, they'll be jealous because she's younger than them, and he wants another wife because the other wives have not given him sons so far, or any children really. And I thought, you know, this is gonna be typical, like, women being hateful, spiteful, and I feel like it's usually like that when it's like a narrative with multiple wives or consorts or concubines. It's like just jealousy. But no, this story really, really surprised me, because the relationship between her and the other wives was the most pure, wholesome thing there was. I just feel like it was done so well, because you kind of are introduced to them very far apart, and Kaikeyi's in this, like, you know, mindset of like, she just lost her family because she had to leave and go into this strange world, and she expected the woman to hate her, the other wives to hate her, so she kind of, that's how she sees it. But then we come to see their true intentions, and they just become this beautiful, strong family unit that is just made out of steel. You know, it's just beautiful how the other two women are so welcoming, and each of them gives birth to a son in the end, one of them to twins, so they have 4 sons. And the way each character sees all of these kids as their own kids, and they're their mothers, the other wives are sisters, and there's one husband, and it's not necessarily polyamory, because I forgot to mention this, but Kaikeyi is actually ace, so she's a romantic and asexual as a character. It's never stated, but that's kind of the rep I got from it, and I've seen it in some other people's reviews and tags, so I think that's pretty accurate. So it's not polyamory in that sense, but just co-living, I guess, and coexisting in this beautiful bond between women that was just so deep. It was just this sisterhood and this support for each other, and just kind of all of them putting aside maybe their little petty emotions and coming together. I thought it was so beautiful, and I loved it. And I just think more of that, please. Like, not every woman have to hate other women and be jealous because of a man. Sometimes, they're very reasonable creatures, and they understand how their culture works, because that's another thing that was normal back then, to have 2-3 wives in that culture, and they would not have, hopefully some of people involved in it would have understood how it works and not being consumed by jealousy. I'm not saying no one was jealous, but I'm just saying it was interesting and refreshing to see a new take on it. And I absolutely loved the relationship there. And it seems like it's different from the original tale, because when I read the Wikipedia page, it was kind of talked about how, in the story, it said that Kaikeyi was so intimidating that the king couldn't even give affection to his other wife, because she would be so vindictive and jealous, but that's not at all what was in this story. So I'm glad the author took liberty, and then the author does just such a good job of like putting in a little bit like, oh, people would have said that this person influenced me, but it's not true. And it's just like, I like how that called to the original myth and what's believed from the original myth, and then kind of took it as, no, that was just a misunderstanding spun way later after the actual events, in order to kind of spin a narrative that fitted the people that spun it. So it was really interesting. But yeah, I love the relationship between the wives and Kaikeyi and the king, who's just the husband. Who would have thunk it? But he actually was such a loving, caring, smart, understanding, and progressive person. And I loved his relationship with all of his wives, with Kaikeyi, with his sons, and just the family unit, the 3 wives, the husband, and the 4 sons became just made me so happy, and they were so happy for a second, and it was just so heartbreaking to see them lose it, because you're just so invested in the beginning in their story. And then we have the sons. So Barafa, I think you say, or Brata or something like that, is Kaikeyi's biological son. When Kaikeyi marries the husband, he gives her a promise that her son will be king, despite the fact that she's the 3rd wife. And then all of the wives give birth at once, so the sons are the same age. So Rama is the son from the original myth, who's like been hailed as the savior, because he's part god and stuff. He's been hailed as a savior, and he's not her biological son. So that's when I said stepson, but it didn't feel like a stepson, because she felt like he was hers, and all of the kids were hers. And I thought the sons were done very well. One of them had absolutely no development. I forgot he existed, and then when his name was said at the end, he had a kind of an important role, and I was like, who now? But even the main character's like, yeah, I didn't really have a big relationship with him, so I guess that's why she didn't mention him. But my favorite actually was one of the twins. You will know which one if you read the book, but I thought that was a super interesting use of the plot, and just like her bonding with the sons always really filled me with happiness. So I really like the sons. I do think that not all of them were equally developed, but at the same time, this book did have a lot of characters, and I think all of them were quite strong. You felt really hard for these supporting characters, like her twin brother, her other brothers. I felt really attached to it. Well, the ones that were named. Her mother, her father, I hated, but you meant to hate him. Her servant, who kind of like helped her raise her when she was a kid, and that in the original story is seen as this like super wicked creature that kind of took this naive character of Kaikeyi and turned her into this, whereas in this book Kaikeyi's never been naive. Yeah, I think all of the supporting characters were done very well. They're very strong by themselves and have a lot of interesting things to say about Kaikeyi and her as well. So yeah, all of them were done very well. Lastly, let's mention the themes. There were a lot of them. A big one was definitely like destiny and gods and how they impact the world, because the gods are real here and they show up and they meddle and they have real impact on the story. And then kind of that I thought was fascinating, because then you have all of these priests and how the sages and how they talk about gods and what gods think women can do and can't do. And you're like, well, this is very misogynistic, but the gods are real and the gods are kind of condoning it a little bit. And you're like, what the hell does that even mean? How do you navigate this world? It was very interestingly done. And then, of course, like, again, spirituality and the fact that Kaikeyi thinks that gods abandoned her and never listened to her prayers, and how that had an impact. And then how Kaikeyi was always more focused on the mortal affairs rather than the spiritual ones. Because of that, that led her, like, Kaikeyi's big mission become, you know, supporting other women and kind of helping them. I think all of that was absolutely beautiful. And yeah, just the intermingling of tradition and what's right and what's wrong, and who's willing to change, who isn't, and patriarchy and the power of the patriarchy to, you know, make good changes and kind of be dismantled, but then how easy it is to be coerced and corrupted with the wrong influences as well. So many interesting themes. And safe to say, I think from this gush, you are getting that my overall thoughts will be, I love this book. I am giving this book 5 stars. I absolutely think that it done the themes beautifully, the characters beautifully. It really felt like truly beautiful spin on this myth or the story that I've never been familiar with, and so I can't really speak also like how accurate it is. It felt to me like it's still really pretty faithful and pretty respectful, but you know, I don't know, I've never heard of it before, but from an outsider's view, I thought it was done brilliantly. Absolutely loved it. If you loved Cersei, you will love this book. I loved Cersei. I love this book. I feel like sometimes, you know, it can be oversold with these comparisons to other books, but I think this one was actually a very, very good indicator of whether you like the book. I absolutely adored it. I want a physical copy. I was gonna buy a physical copy. I had it all planned out. I was gonna go to Waterstones, and then it turns out I pre-ordered the ebook, so I was like, oh, I paid for the ebook, might as well read it. But I think maybe towards the end of the year, I'll definitely treat myself to a copy. But you should go treat yourself to a copy, because absolutely will swear by this book. It'll be on my favorite books of the year list, I think, unless something really truly amazing comes and, you know, knocks it down. But I absolutely love this book. I am so happy that it lived up to the hype in my head. I think it was a beautiful story. This is exactly the kind of book I love and the kind of story I love. It's just slow feeling of divinity and destination kind of meddling into characters' lives. And like, if you like K-dramas, this really reminds me of Empress Ki, which is was my favorite historical K-drama. Empress Ki, and this, which is also based on a real historical figure, is very, very good and close comparison, and I think if you enjoyed one, you will enjoy the other. But that's enough from me. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you read the book. If you did, let me know, did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you like about it? Did I make you want to read it? I really hope I did. If you enjoyed the video, if you could comment, like, and subscribe, I really, really appreciate it. It really helps me out. But that's it from me, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!